All right, we are back for season 5 of Candid Coffee, episode 2 with Councilman Frank Zerunyan. And we are here in Rolling Hills Estate as a chamber. Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me your time to do this episode. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be with you. So
Very nice.
it's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. We both spoke about doing an interview, and I reached out to you because I had come to the beautiful unveiling of the Genocide Memorial Plaque that's right outside the door here. And I was hoping that you would make time to sit down and just have a really easygoing, candid, heartfelt conversation, and for me and our viewers to learn more about you, because as I just mentioned, a lot of people didn't know that you were mayor here and recently resigned, or it stopped.
I rotated out.
You rotated out. There you go. Okay. So you, as of December, you rotated out and you're back to being a councilman. And so I just wanted more people to know that all the great work that you've done in all your roles.
Thank you. Yes. I've been in public office now for 25 years. First 4 as an appointed official. My first election was in 2003. I've been mayor 4 times, as we rotate our mayorship every year.
Mm-hmm. For the same city?
Same city.
Oh, okay, okay.
This is my 5th term in office. My last election was in 2020. It runs out 2024, which may be the last.
Yeah, maybe your last.
Maybe the last.
Okay, well,
we'll see.
See.
You never say no or never in politics, but
of course, yeah.
But
you've had a long run, but I mean, you're still very young, and you have a lot more years to do whatever is your calling. But I think if you are going to stay in a political capacity, I think you're going to do some incredible things in the future as well, because it just seems like a really good fit for you. Looks like it's.
I'm grateful for having had the life that I've had. I'm grateful to my parents that knew the importance of me getting out of the country I was born in. Which is Istanbul, mm-hmm. Turkey, mm-hmm. And go to boarding school in France, which is what I did starting age 11. I went to Mkhitaryan in Paris, Samuel Murat. It was hard when you're 11 years old, leaving your parents. I'm the only child to my parents, so it was not easy to leave. I remember very tough nights under the blanket crying, and in boarding school you don't want to show weakness, so it's a real difficult situation, let's put it this way, but it was the best thing my parents did. And then ultimately, of course, the idea was for me to either stay in Europe or migrate to the United States, and for me to continue my life, because I come from a family of relatively educated people. Genocide stopped all of that. Mm-hmm. Created, of course, like it did for most Armenians, post genocide, rising from ashes of genocide, people that had to earn a living, mm-hmm. as opposed mm-hmm. to going to school. Mm-hmm. So my dad, went to high school, and that's about it. And my mom went to middle school, and that's about it. But they knew that family needed to get back to the education level that we had achieved in prior generations. And they achieved it because I came to the United States when I was 18 years old mm-hmm. to go to college. Mm-hmm.
So you did, grade school, high school in France after boarding school. Then you came here.
Absolutely.
And you were learning English while you were over there as well, I'm assuming.
A little bit.
Yeah.
That was the hard part. I always tell my students that I'm a stickler for writing. I write a lot. I've written a couple books, and I write regularly various articles and short articles. I have a faculty perspective page at the USC that I write almost every month. I post something.
In the newsletter?
I publish something. Yeah, I publish something. It's like more like a blog, I would say.
Okay.
On various topics. My last one involved Ukraine and Armenia and Azerbaijan, for example. It's more opinion / scholarly pieces that I write. So I enjoy writing. But I tell my students that they don't get a pass with me on writing or presentation because English is my 7th learned language.
Yes.
So
that was where I was going with that.
I went from one language to the other, one culture to another. I've lived in 3 different cultures in my life. But that made me better, to be honest
absolutely.
with you. That made me more empathetic. That made me really groomed me for this job. It's really not a job because we're all volunteers. In our city, the tradition is to serve voluntarily. We don't get paid for what we do.
Right.
But it's a great honor to serve, of course, your fellow man. And I can say, and I honestly can say that I've learned more in being in public office than I could have learned ever in going to school or
any school of life.
Absolutely.
Yes, of course.
The experience that you gain, because it's not only the work that you do in the city as an elected official. The statutory responsibilities include regional responsibilities, and of course, if you raise your hand and want to be in leadership, statewide, and I was. I was the president of the California Contract Cities Association, which is about 80 cities with 7.7 million residents. I was a gubernatorial appointee during Governor Schwarzenegger to the State Medical Board. I represented 38 million Californians on the medical board. So I was a regulator, in essence. During the Schwarzenegger administration, I served on that board for 5 years as a vice president of the board. So that's a big job in the state because we have 138,000 medical doctors that are regulated by the board. So I've learned by doing, which is great, and that's my role at USC now. For 14 years, I'm a clinical professor, so I'm a professor to practice, in other words.
Clinical professor, but for law?
Governance and law, yes.
Okay, governance and law. Okay, very cool.
So I teach an undergraduate course called Public Policy and the Law, and I teach a graduate course called Collaborative Governance, and I teach another course called Leading the City.
Wow, okay. And so aside from being in politics, of course, and teaching political science, law, governance, it's all under one giant umbrella. What made you get into this field back, while you were in college? Was this something that was like right away you figured it out, or did it take some time?
No, actually, I took the hard way. But the hard way was the better way for me because coming from France, STEM subjects, of course, were my strong suit, and English or social subjects were not because it involved language.
Right.
So I took all these calculus, biology, chemistry, etc. classes here in college to prepare myself to go to medical school.
Oh, okay.
But
yeah.
My last year in college, I took an elective course, which was called Debate and Argumentation.
Nice.
And just to be different, right?
Yeah.
And my professor was a lawyer, just like me, and said, son, he was an older gentleman, very traditional, said, son, forget medical school. You got to go to law school.
Yeah. Wow.
So that changed my life, of course, right? So
it was like a light bulb.
Because light bulb all of a sudden coming in. I came home. Everybody was supportive. My wife, girlfriend at the time, because we met in college, and was extremely supportive and said, no, he's right. You should be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I went to law school instead.
Wow.
So it was not easy because law school is a lot of reading, of course, complicated language. In my 5th year of immersion into the English language, here I was reading United States Supreme Court cases.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had few very good friends that took me under their wing, and I'm grateful to them. All three are judges today.
Wow.
I still keep contact from time to time.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Yes, and and it worked out.
Yeah.
I became a lawyer and practiced law for well over 20 plus years. And then the opportunity came in academia, and I always wanted to teach. It's just that I think it came a little too early in my career. I was really the peak of my professional career after 20 years of practice.
Right.
You're
What
a
type of law?
top-notch lawyer. I did real estate, land use, and finance. So I represented a lot of developers, banks, and governments.
Right.
My firm was highly specialized. I was a partner in a law firm. My firm was highly specialized in corporate reorganization and bankruptcy work. Not individual bankruptcy, but corporate business bankruptcy. So I was the real estate partner. So a lot of my cases involved restructuring, refinancing, etc. So really enjoyed it. It was very high level practice.
Right.
Preeminent law firm. Really enjoyed it. I mean, I had technically no reason to leave the law, but for perhaps one. And that was the opportunity that came.
Yeah.
The opportunity first actually came from a good friend of mine who was the dean of the law school at Pepperdine.
Okay.
And he talked to me, and that was my first time when I was mayor. My first mayorship was in 2008. And that was the time that he approached me and he said, hey, why don't you come and teach at my school? I said,
as a guest.
And I said, to be honest with you, I'd rather teach policy rather than just law. And he said, well, come and teach in our policy school. And I met with the dean of the policy school at the time, I remember, and he gave me a syllabus and said, here, why don't you teach it? Sometimes, and I said, I really don't want to leave the practice right now, etc. And sometimes, things happen in life that you feel like this is a sign. Somebody is telling me to do something, like the law school story, right? Somebody told me to go to law school instead of medical school. And that somebody was a friend of mine at USC. A week after this conversation with Pepperdine, called me and said, hey, they're looking somebody just like you to teach a course.
The same person?
Different person.
Different person, okay. But it's someone like him,
someone
is
like
what you're saying.
Right,
okay,
exactly.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'm sure, why not? I'll come and talk. And at the time, it was an adjunct faculty position. In other words, part-time faculty. So I could continue teaching law, practicing law, and teach a course, which I did.
Right.
I took USC because my son had been admitted to USC that year in 2008.
My God, how
so my son and I showed up at USC together.
Oh, wow.
It was really cool.
Nice.
Really cool. So Daniel, I was thrilled to go to USC, and his success today is partly because of USC, actually. So I said, this must be a sign. In 1 week, 2 different people are telling me to teach. So I said, I like teach.
That. Yeah, I like that. That's
so I started teaching, and then the dean called and said, look, how about if you do more? I said, well, you can't afford me. A professor's salary. A professor's salary is not what you think it is. So then he said, well, you'll figure it out. And then I figured it out in a sense that I wrote the business model for creating a brand new program at the school, which is a program that I still direct at my school. It's an executive education program for mayors, council members, city managers, municipal directors, etc. And that program now is in its 12th year, and we get
at USC.
Right, at USC.
And you're the only one teaching it.
No, I'm the one directing it, but I use various faculty from our faculty. And every year we have a few hundred people that go through our summits and programs in the Executive Education Forum, that we call it. So I created that, and I was able to fund it and raise money, develop it,
Wow.
etc.
Wow.
So it worked out very well for us,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
that way I became full time.
Mm-hmm.
Just teaching would not have worked. So my administrative responsibility started with directing that program, and then now I direct two more programs. So my administrative responsibilities have increased. So my teaching is reducing. Actually, I can't teach that much because I don't have the time to teach that much. I still do because I still want to be in the classroom. I love it.
But you got a good amount of that
Oh yeah,
under your belt where you were satisfied with, teaching students, and then you kind of progressed into something and
absolutely.
branched out and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's nothing like two things I've done in life, both serving my fellow man and my community and influencing young minds are
Yes.
the most beautiful things one can do.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed it very, very much.
I love that, and I love your dedication, and I can see your emotions and the passion that you have for it very much. So I love that so much. Um, and then now, I mean, not that I'm expecting you to slow down, but what are you actively working on now, and for the next maybe 5 years?
Right. So you're right. I am not the type to slow down. And I am. I can't retire. I mean, I'm not the kind that's going to ever retire. Now, that probably will mean that I will reduce my involvement, and in fact, the university will probably push me out at one point because university setting is so that you retire at a certain time, and and you become more of a emeriti faculty, and new folks come in, of course, which is fine, and I understand that, and that time will come. I'm 63 today, and I suspect that time will come in the next 5 to 7 years. But I'm a global professor. I teach all over the world, and I write. I'm an author. I write books, and I write book chapters and articles. I will continue that as long as my brain is there.
Working, right.
I want to die writing. Let's put it this way. There's two things that I always say I want to die doing. One, people say to me, "Well, why do you need your license to practice law anymore? Because you're not." And I said, I am going to keep my license. In fact, I'm going to ask my children to bury my license with me. So that's the one thing that I will never give up.
Okay.
So I renew my license every year. I do my whatever additional work that I need to do because every lawyer is required every 3 years to do
Right.
25 hours of
Well, they want to make sure you're
credit.
super
Right,
sharp.
exactly. So I do that and renew my license every year, pay my dues and all of that because I want to die with it. And the second thing, I want to die writing.
That's amazing. That's amazing because I know that just the satisfaction of, I don't know if you have to pass a test or do certain criteria that you need to meet every year for your license or whatever, that keeps you so sharp and you're like, yes, I did it again. And
It's not a test, but it's a bunch of
Yeah.
a series of lectures that you have to listen to,
Right.
and in various arenas of the law. Ironically, at this stage of my life, I can teach those, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm always a student, so it's always
Right,
I'm
right.
happy to listen to any
I
novelty.
love that. Very cool. Very cool. Let's get into one of the main reasons why we're actually here at this location. And I love that we're in this room. And you were gracious enough to bring out these two posters to help tell a story. There's a plaque right outside, and it was a beautiful plaque that was presented a little over a month ago for the Genocide Memorial that depicts this woman with her child. And let's talk about the importance of both of these pictures and how it translates to the plaque outside.
Thank you for that, and I'm very appreciative that you are helping get the word out for something that I'm passionate about, that I've lived for. I am the grandchild of a survivor. I am the grandchild and a great-grandchild of a victim of the Armenian genocide. All of my life, the only person I had who was my grandmother, I only lived with her for about 18 years of my life. And as I told you, I was out from age 11 going to Paris. So I used to see her only summertime when I went back to Istanbul to visit my parents. But it was productive time. She never wanted to talk about it, but she always wanted to, I almost felt like she always wanted to pass on to me. And whatever reason, she felt perhaps that I will make a difference one day. The story and the importance of the story of the death marches, and what she was subjected to, what she had experienced. My grandmother had one eye. She had lost one eye on the death march. Her mother, with her two other siblings, went onto the death march because her father had already gone to Istanbul to start a business, recognizing the difficulties that were happening in their hometown. They are Gesariatsis, specifically Everek, which is Kayseri today, in Middle Anatolia. Mm-hmm. And they left their hometown, marched towards Derzor, which is directly south towards the Syrian desert, to die. They survived. Now, to tie this to this woman, I see this woman as my great-grandmother, because the youngest sibling of my grandmother was tied on her back on the death march just like this. When for the first time, I saw this poster, which is taken after that original photography that dates back to the early 1900s, 1915-ish. This poster was made in New York. This poster is the production of the Near East Relief Foundation, which was created by then Ambassador Morgenthau during the Woodrow Wilson administration, that became the ambassador to the Ottoman Empire. And frankly, if it were not for him and his instructions to the consular offices of Anatolia, of the United States, we would not have 30,000 pages of documentation of the genocide in the State Department or the Library of Congress today. So he felt the pain of the Armenian people and talked to his friends, including the President of the United States, by the way, Woodrow Wilson, in forming perhaps an organization, a not-for-profit organization where people could donate money to at least save the orphans of the genocide. He knew Woodrow Wilson was not interested in getting involved in the war, World War I, which the precursor was the genocide, and then World War I occurs. Right. So he knew that the only help he could give is to the next generation. Mm-hmm. And he started a campaign, as you can see on this poster, a campaign for $30 million to be able to fund orphanages around the Ottoman Empire: Greece, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Tbilisi, so that these orphans could be housed and taught skills. So the campaign was for 30 million originally. Near East Relief Foundation raised $117 million between the years 1919 and 1923. It was an amazing accomplishment, perhaps never matched, to be honest with you, because in today's dollars, you're talking $2.8 billion that was raised. Charlie Chaplin, Jackie Coogan, all of Hollywood participated to the traditions of living the life of the orphans, which was eating bread and olives as their meals. So the term starving Armenians became from that, or was based on that. And they were able to raise it and create these orphanages. So the orphanages taught a bunch of skills. The reason why in France, in Canada, in the United States, in Australia, in Lebanon, you see Armenian tailors, Armenian shoemakers, Armenian jewelers, Armenian tapestry makers. These are all skills that were taught at the orphanages. So these kids grew up and went into the diaspora, as we call it, and started their businesses. It was a genius, absolutely amazing concept to put together and save the lives of the next generation.
Right.
He couldn't save the lives of
Their
the
parents.
generation past,
Yeah.
and he knew it, but he could save the next generation.
Right, right.
A lot of people are alive today because of that concept and because of this money. So I wanted not only pay homage to my heritage and what I grew up in, the message that was given to me by my grandmother, and the story of the bread and the olives is an interesting one. We had an island home, and every summer, my cousin and I grew up very close. My cousin is a physician. He's a cardiologist. He's a pediatric cardiologist. He lives here now. He's here. He is at USC Keck and at the county hospital. Now he migrated towards the county hospital, but he used to teach at Keck as well. So the two of us, he had gone to Venice to Vegetarian and me to Paris. My dad did not want us together because we were very competitive. So he and I were on our island home, and we had my grandmother with us, I remember. So Merujan used to throw the olives in his mouth all at once and take the whole bread and eat it or not eat it or whatnot. And I watched my grandmother, and she was watching in horror what was happening. And both of us were like, "What's wrong, Grandma?" And she said, "Don't you dare eating the olive that way."
Okay.
So my cousin said, "Well, that's how we eat olives." She says, "No. You have to bite the olive 8 times, each olive, and each time you have to eat with bread." That is exactly what they did on their death march.
Oh my gosh.
They were given 8 olives a day to eat
Yeah.
with a piece of bread. That's all they had for subsistence. So that all of a sudden came to her in that imagery that she saw with my cousin.
You were
and
being
I.
reckless with the olives.
We were being totally reckless with
Yeah.
olives. I never knew that one could be reckless with an olive,
Right.
but we were.
Yeah, yeah. My grandfather is Hunahai, and they were from Larissa and Athens, and his mother was Greek and father was Armenian. Father was a genocide survivor as well. When I was, he survived famine and everything, and իրանց համար էլ մի կտոր հաց, կարակով, կամ մի կտոր հաց with olives. And because he was like that, and I lived with him when we migrated here, ինքը ինձ դպրոցից որ բերում էր տուն, it was like մի պատար հաց, բանով, զեյթունով, and it was something that I loved because he loved, because we ate it together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that I remember that very well, vividly, and that's one of those stories. I mean, I will most likely write a book one day about all this because there's so many. We don't have time to go through all of the experiences, all the messaging that my grandmother gave me for my life, which has been tremendous. But that's how I grew up.
Right.
So all of that gave me or armed me with the responsibility to talk about men's and humanity to men. So when I was a young lawyer, I used to be part of the ANC lobbying organization, for example, and I used to represent the ANC as a lawyer too, and used to go to Washington, D.C., lobby, and I remember my lobbying days in even the State Department when Madeleine Albright was Secretary of State, all the challenges we had with respect to, at the time, using the word genocide, of course. And then if you look at my faculty perspective pages, I've written several pieces on this, and ultimately an open letter to the President of the United States, President Biden, and then a thank you letter when he acknowledged the Armenian genocide, which I felt all of these years that I put in lobbying for the recognition to a degree. I mean, I'm not satisfied yet that we've gotten there yet,
Right.
because it's saying is one thing, acting is another. It's very unfortunate that the administration currently is not acting it, is just saying it. So the difficulty right now we have in Artsakh, for example, with Azerbaijan being as the aggressors as they are, and the United States is still helping Azerbaijan, for example, or the waiver
Arming
of
them.
Section of 907 it has been troubling to me. But that being said, it was really something important to me to lobby. And then after my lobbying efforts, when I was first elected to this council, starting immediately, the first April 24th, I began to speak from the dais to my community about men's inhumanity to men and the Armenian genocide. So for now almost 20 years, my community has heard me speak about this issue.
Right.
And then the last couple of years, it culminated in my colleagues saying, well, maybe we should have something here. And I said, well, that would be wonderful. And they were very gracious. And when I proposed this, to say, yes, absolutely. It's the first of its kind, meaning that I am not aware. We researched to see whether or not we could find another one like this on the grounds of a city hall. We
City
couldn't.
Hall. Right.
There are many genocide memorials, as you know,
Of course.
even on public ground,
Yes.
but none that we could find on City Hall
City Hall
ground.
grounds.
This
Yes.
is right at the entrance of the City Hall.
Yes, yes.
Everyone who comes to City Hall sees this woman with the child, which again inspired by this poster. And Dikran, who was the artist who did this, I interviewed several, and Dikran first drew this. And what struck me as something that I really wanted to see was I described to Dikran how I wanted this woman. From, of course, inspired by the poster, but I described to Dikran exactly the face that you see on this woman. The way I look at her, and I say always to people, please come and see it up close. Pictures don't do justice to it. When you come and see it up close, you'll realize, looking at this woman, a certain level of pain, suffering, yet grace, serenity, and a calmness to soothe her child who is right on her back. That's what I described to Dikran. And I said, that's what I want as my legacy to be in this city that I served and loved. And he was successful in doing it. Yeah. He captured exactly that, because as I said, I see this as my great-grandmother marching to the desert to die.
Right.
But survived. And by the way, I always, in my talks, I also talk about humans, human beings, and humanity, because whether you're Armenian or anything else, humanity is humanity. Because some people asked, why here and why this?
Right.
And I said, men's inhumanity to men is not an Armenian issue. It's not a Jewish issue. It's not a Rwandan issue. It's not a Bosnian issue.
Right.
It's a humanity issue. And if I can help anyone who walks into this hall and into this city hall to remind them of their humanity, then I've accomplished my purpose. because that's the most critical thing that we need to achieve as people, because my grandmother and great-grandmother were saved by the generosity and humanity of a Turkish family.
That was going to be my next question, is how did they survive? How did your great-grandmother survive?
A family took them in a village, hid them from the gendarmes, and were able to get them on their way to Istanbul to find their father, which, by the way, is another disastrous tragedy because it happened after several years. And at the time, the Patriarchate of Istanbul was setting up, believe it or not, men and women who had survived, even if they were married, to remarry, to procreate. My great-grandfather married another person.
By force.
No choice.
Right.
They needed to procreate. They needed more people. 1.5 million were slaughtered.
I see.
Armenian nation had to survive.
I see, okay.
So I don't see that as force. I
Right.
see them more as concern for their race.
Right.
5 years later, the first wife with the children show up. What a tragedy.
Oh my gosh.
What a tragedy.
Wow.
But the new wife was more than happy to take them in and consider her a sister. Now, of course, they were never husband and wife, because the second wife was the wife now. But they lived
Under the same
under
roof?
the same roof,
Oh, wow.
and they made it work.
That's incredible. I mean, if you think about how much worse things could have been
Oh,
at the time,
sure.
and the devastation that you saw,
Absolutely.
then you're kind of like, well, I mean, this doesn't sound too bad. I think we're gonna
No
have to do
question.
this. Yes, exactly.
There is a saying in Turkish.
Hayır, yekortkina hayır.
Of course,
Aha,
of course, of
okay.
course, of course.
Yeah.
There's a saying in Turkish that says, the difficulty solves the game.
I see.
Zor oyunu bozar in Turkish. Which is very true. When in times of difficulties, the game is irrelevant.
How many more children did he have with the second wife?
Actually, believe it or not, did not.
Did not.
Did not.
Okay.
I don't know how that happened.
Right.
But did not. But these three grew up and married, of course. And my grandmother married late for her time. She had one eye. And those times, aesthetics and looks
Yeah, I
mattered.
mean, it always does, but it's good that she still did.
Yes,
exactly.
So someone, my grandfather, had that courage and the good heart
Yeah.
to marry this woman, and made a great marriage, and had a son and a daughter, my aunt, and formed a great family, and that worked out very well, and we cherished my grandmother. I never knew my grandfathers. They both had died before I was born. They both, because suffered so much that their body couldn't take it anymore.
Right.
They died very young,
Right.
late 50s, early 60s.
Very young, yeah.
From my perspective, that's what that monument represents. It represents our humanity. It represents men's inhumanity to men. And as I always say from the dais, I can never bring back my ancestors, our ancestors, but I can at least point the finger and help perhaps the next genocide from happening.
Right.
And that's what that is.
Right, exactly.
And that's what is a reminder of all of that, with a very personal touch about how I see it personally in the lives of my great-grandmother and grandmother.
And you're I mean, a part of you is in that plaque. A part of your grandmother is in that plaque.
It is.
Many years from now, if And when you're not here, it's still going to
Yes,
be here standing
be.
because of you in a city that is very, out of the way from the Armenian community. And I love that it's
Yeah.
here instead of
I
in
am
Glendale or, Burbank or something.
very grateful for
Yeah.
my community. I live in a great community. I've lived on the Palos Verdes Peninsula for the last 40 plus years, 33 years in this city of Rolling Hills Estates. I've served this city now for, as I said, 24 years. I would have retired if I do in the next 2 years by serving the city 25, 26 years. That is worth every minute of those 26 years.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
from my
I love that.
perspective, it's a wonderful thing that my community graced me with, and I'm eternally grateful for that.
Beautiful. Is there anything else you want to add?
The
Final
only
thoughts.
thing I want to add is that going forward, we're building a website.
Okay.
There will be a QR code that will come right next to the monument. Anyone interested will click on the QR code and will go to the website, which I will write the content for, and all this information that we spoke about will be on there, and with more information and more pictures of its time to explain to the American people not only the history of the genocide, but also the graciousness of the American people who helped the orphans or the next generation of the genocide. So that will be there. Also, there's a camera there, actually, if you noticed it. So we're looking at the technology to be able to link the camera to the website so that someone from Australia wants to see it through the website would be able to see that monument live.
Live. Right. You mentioned that at the unveiling. I remember.
So I'm really looking forward to that because I want the world to see this monument, whether you're in Yerevan or Sydney, Australia, or Toronto, Canada, or Paris, France, or Marseille, France. I want everyone to be able to experience this. Now, it's not going to be the same as seeing it up close in person, as I said. The capturing of that feeling, it may not be there, but that's what we're going to do. And the Pepper Tree Foundation, which is the city's foundation, is responsible for commissioning the plaque and the statuette, but the funds were raised privately. I raised those funds privately from friends of mine, including me, in order to pay for that. And also I'm continuing to raise funds for it through the Pepper Tree Foundation so that we have an endowment, because I'm not going to be here all the time. And I want to make sure that before I leave, I endow a certain portion of the money for the maintenance of it. So that it is always maintained properly.
Of course.
And it remains here after we're all gone.
Yes, that's beautiful. Perfect. That was perfect. I love it. Thank you. Can I call you Frank?
Of course.
Okay. Thank you.
Or Vram, whichever one you want.
I love it. I love it. And is that really your
Vram?
Vram?
Of course.
Oh, okay. That's your name.
My baptismal name is Vram Shabu.
Wow.
After one of the best kings of the Armenia.
Wow.
Vosketarian Shirchan, of course. It was my grandfather's name. It was my paternal grandfather's name. He was Vram Shabu also. Everybody called him Vram.
Vram.
Or Fram, because he was blonde, blue eyes. And the Frank, actually, I got
from there.
From there.
Yeah, I see. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, so when I became citizen in the United States, and in my profession, Vram for judges, etc., was a little difficult.
Very difficult.
So Frank became my name to run for office and be in courts, etc. But my family calls me Vram still, and my wife calls me Vram, and
nice.
Everybody that I know up close in the community calls me Vram. But I respond to both Frank and Vram.
Right.
So whichever one you want to call me, I'm good.
I like it. I didn't know about Vram, but now I know, and I like it even more. Did your parents send you to a boarding school because they were afraid for your well-being and safety?
Yes.
Okay.
And also my education.
Okay. Okay.
because the level of education in
Because giving up
Istanbul,
your only child,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
hard.
I'm telling you, I'm so eternally grateful to my parents,
Yeah.
because there's no way I would have been able to go to law school in Turkey. In fact, you could not really. I mean, in Turkey, at the time that I was growing up, you could not be a mail carrier. You could not be
If you're Armenian.
yes.
Yeah.
You could not be a, believe it or not, a trash hauler.
Wow.
I'm not kidding. It's true.
Yeah.
You could not be a teacher of Turkish, regardless of the fact that the Turkish alphabet was created by an Armenian.
Oh my God. I did not know
Of
that.
course, Hagop Dilaçar. Atatürk gave him his last name, Dilaçar. You know what it means in Turkish? Lezu patsoh.
Really?
The one that opens the tongue.
The tongue.
Dilaçar in
Dilaçar.
Turkish. Hagop Dilaçar was his name. He wrote the Turkish alphabet.
Did you know that?
Actually,
That's amazing.
everything major Turkish
Yeah.
has
was
an
made in
Armenian
Armenia.
behind it.
Of course. Of course.
From the major bridges, for example, from the Ottoman era, Mimar Sinan was an Armenian. Mimar is architect. Architect Sinan was an Armenian boy.
Sinan.
Sinan, of course. The Balyan family built Dolmabahce Palace.
Jeez.
I mean, you can go down the line of all the
It's painful to
the
know that,
the
though.
worst painful
Yeah.
thing that I last saw
Yeah.
was a picture of President Erdogan with two of his ministers at the presidential palace. If you look at two hanging pictures in their back, Ivazovsky's.
That's annoying. Yeah. It's so bitter. It's very annoying and painful.
Two prominent Turkish flags next to them.
Ugh.
They're posing for a picture. You look at the two paintings on the wall. They're
Behind
both
them.
painted by
Yeah.
an Armenian.
Yeah. I don't know. Mik ook iets en talent ka skills and knowledge and I know that we're inventors and we're scholars and we're painters and we're artists and all of those things, but I hate that we're giving it to them.
Well, the worst pain actually is even worse. I don't want to ruin your day. But,
No, it's okay.
But the worst pain, I wrote an article about this in the Diplomacy magazine at USC because they came to me and said, hey, we want to write about monuments. You think you can write something? I said, hell yes. So I called it The Monuments of My Ancestors. You can look it up. I'm sure it's you can.
Where do you have all your work? Where is it published? Do you have a website?
Different places. This one was published at the Diplomacy magazine of the USC. My faculty perspective is all published on our website at Price School. And then I'm published at various journals like The Conversation, Apolitical out of UK, Global Times. I mean, I've had articles everywhere.
You should collect them all and put them in one website.
You know, that's a good point, and
Yeah.
I've never done that. And I may put a student to work actually to collect them all. At this point, I've probably written 100 pieces or so that were published.
Yeah, have them all in
They're
one
all
place.
out there. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yes.
I haven't done that yet. And then, of course, the books. But I wrote an article called The Monuments of My Ancestors. So the research I was doing about it, there were 2,600 churches in Western Armenia, which is today Turkey. There are 33 left today.
Wow.
They're all ruined.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Talk about loss of art, loss of
Heritage,
talent, culture.
everything.
So genocide, I always talk about this, especially with the denial of the genocide, which actually there's scholarship on this topic. There's a lot of scholars who've written that genocide, the continuation of the genocide is the denial.
Is the denial of it, of course.
So unfortunately, in our case, that continues.
Of course.
not that it's any better, but at least you have the Holocaust, for example, that have been recognized, paid for, continues to pay for on a regular basis. Germany
Made a bunch of movies about it.
made a bunch of movies about it.
Books are
etc.
not being questioned.
Ours is, we
Yeah.
have a couple movies about it, and not much as recovery when it comes to returning of a lot of the property. By the way, recently, I don't know if you read it, but one major building in Istanbul, miraculously, my good friend, the patriarch, the prior patriarch who passed away, Mesrop Sirpazan, he was my age. We were very good friends. And had sued the state to recover one of the main buildings where a school was in Istanbul.
In Istanbul, yeah.
That litigation, after 12 years, is over. The Supreme Court in Turkey ruled that Turkish government could not prove their ownership. They had to return it. They just returned it.
Wow.
To the Patriarchate.
Okay. What exactly was returned?
The building.
The whole. Okay.
The whole building.
Okay. And they can't touch it. They can't do anything to it.
It's a great asset. I'm so delighted that it was returned to the Patriarchate.
Okay.
But
well, that's some good news.
That's small potato compared
it
to what was lost and what is lost. And now it's happening in Artsakh, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Artsakh is losing all of the churches that are out there. Azerbaijan is destroying them. And very sad to see this cultural loss.
It is.
But, we live in
reality.
the world we live. And again, coming back, that's what makes everybody hopefully remind our humanity first and foremost.
Absolutely.
And I don't care if it's Armenian, Irish, or whatever. We're all human beings, and we need to recognize that, and we need to be reminded on a regular basis.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great note to end on. Amazing. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for this amazing interview. We did great. And I know there's so much more to talk about, but hopefully this will be a great start for everyone to get to know you, get to know the piece, and why you're so passionate about everything that we discussed and helping Rolling Hills Estate for the remainder of your career. So,
well, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
Of course.
And thank you for doing this. And whatever we can do to help to get the word out, we will.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to that website and the continuation and the endowment of that asset in the city for years to come.
Absolutely. Thank you.